Welcome to NEMC TV 6, the Focus program. My name is Terry Kozlarich. I'm your host, and with me today is the focus on amateur radio. We have Val Barreau and John Hebert from the Macomb County Amateur Radio Public Service Corps. Welcome.
Good morning.
Tell me a little bit about the Amateur Public Service Corps.
The Amateur Radio Public Service Corps is a collection of amateur radio operators that want to serve their local community. They serve by providing emergency communications. They train for this and are on call for communications backup in times of emergency. We train by providing communication support for parades and marathons, things like that. And when the inevitable happens, we stand ready to call out and provide backup for the responders.
I understand that you're an ARES RACES organization. What is ARES? What is RACES?
Well, ARES is the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, and you don't have to be a ham operator to participate in ARES, but you're going to be someone who is interested in helping out in an emergency. They'll have to know the place to go if as or when they get activated. You can't just go charging off willy-nilly and say, I'd like to help, even if you don't know what you're doing. So it requires familiarization with the emergency procedures in the areas. RACES, Radio Amateur Civilian Emergency Service, requires training that you can get online from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and there are certain classes you have to have completed before you can be RACES certified, but that's required a larger commitment, and RACES operators traditionally are also ham operators.
Okay, so what would be some examples of the things that the people in the ARES would participate in?
Well, take the parades and marathons and so forth. We need radio operators to staff water stations, parking lots, parade marshal kinds of circumstances. These are people that it's a more casual kind of a commitment, and we can count on them to come out and be good helpers. Probably the RACES kind of level involves people that have more in-depth knowledge of emergency procedures and communications protocols and dealing with the different levels of hierarchy in the emergency management structure.
So what does it take to become an amateur radio operator?
A lot of things have changed in the past few years. A lot of folks remember when you had to have like Morse code proficiency to get an amateur radio license. That's not the case anymore. You do have to have a knowledge of the law. You have to know that pertains to amateur radio. You have to know something about how radio waves propagate and something about how to be a good operator on the air. And you're tested on this. It's a federal test, but actually it's administered by fellow amateurs. There are several license classes for people that want to get started easily and then work their way up to more and more challenging and interesting parts of the hobby. So to answer the question, the novice license, technician's license is the easy way in. People have studied the book for 3 days and take the test and pass it right away.
And so there's different levels of participation?
Yes.
So what are the different levels of participation?
Well, you start with technician level, and you can take a class or study the book or the books, and the next level up is general, and that allows you more frequencies to operate on once you've got your radio equipment. And above that is advanced, and that the whole world is open to you by then. But each test, of course, is more difficult than the one before. I've taken the technician and the general test, and I think that's my limit.
That's your limit?
Yeah.
So at your technician level, what are you able to do?
Well, you're able to use the VHF frequencies and UHF frequencies.
And what does that mean?
I'm going to get into that just a moment here. We get to communicate Essentially short range distances,
Okay.
much like you would using, like a walkie-talkie kind of a device or a mobile radio. You can also use what we call the short waves. You can talk internationally if you wish, and many people do, and they enjoy that aspect of the hobby.
Okay.
But like John said, the range of frequencies that you can use is smaller for the novice.
Okay. I've heard people can talk internationally and nationally. Is that what the higher licenses bring?
You can do that with the technician license as well, but the bands that you can work, the frequencies, are more limited.
I see.
The prime picking is out of reach.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a break for a moment, and we'll be right back.
Right?
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1,000,000. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
Welcome back to the Focus on Amateur Radio. So, you were telling me a little bit about the different levels of participation in licenses, and we were talking about technician. What's the next level?
Well, that would be a general class. John, why don't you handle that one?
Well, since I took the general class about a test about a year ago, what the idea of general class is, it gives you more frequencies that you can participate in legally according to the FCC rules. So instead of just talking locally with other ham radios, operators and so on, you can start thinking about talking with Europe and Asia and Australia and things like that, because then you're going to get access to radios with more range.
I see.
Not only in power, but in the frequencies covered.
Okay. And then what is the third level that you were talking about?
Third level is amateur extra.
Okay, and what does that consist of?
It's a test just like the other two levels, and it just gives you more capability, more ranges of frequencies to play with, for lack of a better term.
That and I mentioned earlier that the tests are administered by amateur radio operators, and the extra class operators are licensed to provide these federal tests for the other licensed classes.
Okay.
A lot of the extra class operators take advantage of some very thin but very prime segments of frequency where you can find distant stations from around the world, and you can make these communications for bragging rights or for technical excellence and training and so forth.
So how long is a license good for?
10 years.
It's good for 10 years?
And it's not a bad deal, considering you're paying $15 to take the test. That's $1.50 a year.
And do you have to retest at the end of that time?
You have to reapply
You have to
at the end of
reapply.
that time. If your license expires after that 10 years, you're going to have to retest. But if you can renew it before it expires, it's free, and it's just another 10 years.
So each operator has their own equipment?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Speaking of equipment,
Did you bring some equipment that you'd like to show
I
us?
brought a couple of things to show the folks.
Okay.
Now, a lot of folks are going on a ride with Uncle Ted or Dad or somebody, and they turn on the CB radio, and it's full of interference and maybe some bad language, and the range is pretty limited. And you say, gee, what is that useful for? Is this like ham radio? Well, no, it actually is not. Ham radio operator in their car might have something that looks a lot like the same thing. This one here operates on FM. You don't get the interference. And you can use things called repeaters for great distances. And we're linked up to talk all over Michigan, right from the front seat of your car as you're going down the road. You keep in emergency communications that way. There are handheld radios. We call them handy talkies.
Looks like the old telephones for cell phones.
Something like that, yeah. It's got a number pad on it. And this provides a lot of the same function as that mobile unit, a little less range, but we use these a lot in emergency communications when we're out in the field.
Okay. Can you explain to me how this equipment can provide communications when your local emergency personnel can't?
Very good question. Folks might say, well, I can come to an emergency, I've got a cell phone, and I can help out. Well, perhaps they can, and we hope that folks do. You call 911 if you see an emergency. Do that. If there's a big emergency, there's going to be a lot of people on their phones. The cell towers are going to get overloaded. You're not going to get through, number one. Number two, the people that are doing this have not trained for it. They don't know communications protocols, and they're not sure of what to say and how to say it and what to do or where to go.
Okay.
So this is where we train to be aware of these things and to be proficient at them.
Okay. So is there any particular piece of equipment that you need to be able to communicate in emergency at, you were talking your lowest level?
A lot of the amateur radio operators, when they get first licensed, they'll talk with some other amateur radio operators that maybe have equipment that they want to upgrade. And so they'll sell them something like their old handy talkie. This happens to be a pretty good one if you find one at a swap meet. They work very well, and you can pick one up for $50 from a friend or at a swap meet.
Okay.
Some of them enjoy building their own. This happens to be a kit I made, and it works on the shortwave bands. It works at about 3 watts. It receives and transmits, and it was a ball to put together.
That's the whole radio?
That's the whole thing right here.
Doesn't come with a case or anything, but you built that.
I think it looks pretty like this. Only an amateur would find prettiness in that.
Okay. So are radio operators paid for their services when they respond?
Absolutely not.
No?
John?
That's the whole idea of the term amateur as opposed to professional.
Oh, okay.
Amateurs don't get paid. Yeah, maybe donuts now and then on an emergency site or come lunchtime.
Okay.
But they're there because they want to be.
Right.
And as was mentioned earlier, people want to give back into the community whatever debt they feel, and they want to help out, because when things start getting ugly, you need all the help you can get, but you need trained help.
Okay.
And it is practiced help.
So does your organization provide training for its members?
Every meeting that we have, which is once a month,
Okay.
there is a training aspect to it. Plus, our leader goes into what events are coming up.
Okay.
So if there's a bike marathon coming up, he's going to start getting people interested in participating in that.
Okay.
And as it gets closer, then they're going to get assigned specific stations along the route and specific instructions.
I see. So
what
it's
to
all
do.
a planned event then.
Exactly.
Are there age restrictions?
No, no. If you can read the questions and you can answer the questions, you can be a licensed amateur radio operator. And on the other end of the spectrum, there are amateur radio operators in their 90s that are quite active.
Okay, so it's the type of hobby that you can participate in even if you're maybe not mobile or you can't get out much, you can still participate?
One of my friends is a blind amateur radio operator.
Okay.
And it was a challenge for her to get her license, but she worked at it diligently, and she has the highest class license. I'm proud of her.
So your group doesn't receive any funding from any outside organizations? I mean,
No, no. As a matter of fact, we're forbidden by law to
Okay.
make money at amateur radio operating. This is partly to prevent commercial interests from taking advantage of an essentially free service.
I see. So how do you know when it's time for you to show up for an emergency? I mean, do you hear it on the radio and everybody just runs? Or how do you know when it's time for you to show up?
If the weather looks bad, you turn on the radio to see if there's something happening. We also have a call-out
Okay.
list where the emergency coordinator would call his assistants, and the assistants would then call the more active participants, and so on down the road,
Okay.
alerting people by telephone or whatever means they can that the participation is needed.
I see. So who is it that calls your group and activates them?
That would be the Macomb County Emergency Services.
Oh, sounds very interesting. Well, we're going to take a break here for a moment, and we'll be right back.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course. Put away a few bucks, feel like $1,000,000. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
Welcome back to the Focus program with our guests John and Val. So we were talking a little bit about training. Can you tell me some of the training that you guys have received?
We receive training every month
Okay.
in operations and how to be an effective communicator. We learn the FEMA way of reporting things and handling structures, and how to work with these responding agencies, be they the Macomb County Sheriff's Department, the Macomb County Health Department, and how to work in with these. And this is primarily the training.
I understand that you work pretty closely with the National Weather Service, true?
Yeah, because we get Skywarn training
Okay.
for those who want to become spotters
And what
of
is a
severe
spotter?
weather. Well, a spotter is somebody who gets outside generally and starts keeping track of where this severe weather is going, and then reports in either by phone or by ham radio
Okay.
as to what's going on. You know, what time is the event, what is the event, and what's the location of the event.
I see. So you don't necessarily have to be an amateur radio operator to participate in the Skywarn.
That's right. You can be a Skywarn spotter without being a ham radio operator.
Okay. So if people were interested in becoming an amateur radio operator, do you have meetings?
We have meetings once a month with the ARPSC.
Okay.
Now, these are probably of a more technical nature than somebody that's just coming in.
Okay.
There are a number of amateur radio clubs about, and they're very good ones. I'm a member of the General Motors Amateur Radio Club,
Okay.
www.gmarc.org, I believe. There's also the Utica Shelby Emergency Communication Association, also USICA. Very good group of people, very friendly. They enjoy bringing folks in and helping them out. They conduct classes and licensing, and they go out to parks and things and have fun with each other. I recommend USICA. That's Utica Shelby Emergency Communication Association, and it's got a funny website. Perhaps you can put that up on the screen after the show.
Sure, we can put that up. Tell me a little bit about the times that your group has responded to emergencies or participated in some of the things. Have you ever had any emergencies come up during your times?
Last week, we had those severe storms coming through the area, and the net that runs under those circumstances lit up, basically, with a whole bunch of people checking in as spotters, reporting their location and any events that they had spotted. And it was all fed back into the net control, which then is in contact with the National Weather Service, keeping them apprised as to what's going on where.
So that's where the National Weather Service gets their information from?
That's part of their information, from spotters actually on the ground as opposed to just the radar and the satellite photos.
I see.
There are also some unfortunate events that have happened in recent history. The tragedy at the Selfridge Air Show. Amateur radio operators were on scene. In fact, our emergency communicator, while other people were wandering around saying, "Oh my God," he was busy with his paper and pencil writing down pertinent information that actually helped with the reconstruction efforts. At the Free Press Marathon year before last, unfortunately, 3 people suffered heart attacks. Amateur radio operators were first on scene. As a matter of fact, in 2 of those cases, the amateur radio operators on scene were also emergency medical technicians. And my own personal experience last year at the Back to the Beach Marathon, a fellow came by, looked really poorly. I couldn't get him to sit down. He kept on going, went face down. Next amateur radio operator down the road called it in. We coordinated the emergency crew to get there and take him to the hospital. He was in for 4 months and came out with brain damage, unfortunately. Had we not been there, he probably would have died.
I see. So I understand that there's a ham radio on the space station. Is that true?
True.
It's a real adventure to work the space station.
Have you ever done that?
No, I haven't.
That would be nice. So do you have a website that people can take a look at for your organization?
www.wa8mac.net, isn't it?
I think it's net, yeah.
Okay. And is that the only place that people can get information about becoming an amateur radio
No,
operator?
there's the American Radio Relay League.
Okay.
And I mentioned the USECA. There's the Oakland County ARPSC.
Okay.
And I understand you're going to have these on the screen at the, on the show. Much better than me repeating them. You can contact the American Radio Relay League by mail. Pick up their fine handbook on how to become licensed. Their address is at 225 Main Street in Newington, Connecticut, 06111.
So I have one more question for you before we close for the day. What is an Elmer?
An Elmer is a mentor for new ham.
Okay.
Generally, or a less experienced ham than the Elmer is. I don't recall when this got started, but it's been some time that the term Elmer has happened. A new person comes into a club or he comes in a neighborhood and he starts getting set up. An older, experienced ham will say, let me help you. And if the person is smart enough to say, yes, I'd like help, I need help, then this older, more experienced person becomes his Elmer.
I see. So did you find when you first started that you had somebody help you get through maybe the niches that you may find when you're starting a new hobby?
I had one right at the very beginning, and it was very helpful because I was just, what am I doing here?
I see.
So he helped a lot.
Well, I've appreciated having you guys here and sharing all your information, and we're going to put all your information up on the website, and you've had some great things that you had to tell us.
Well, thanks for having us on. And hope to see you on the air.
I hope to see you too.
And hope to see some new members.
I'm sure that'll become a lot of people interested in this.
Good.
This is NEMC TV 6, focused on amateur radio. Thank you for watching.